Welcome to The COVID Effect, a podcast mini-series brought to you by The Razor's Edge. In this series, we talk to music industry insiders delving into the effects the COVID pandemic has brought upon each guest's field within the industry. In our final episode of the series, we chat with Emma Scott, the former voice of Kerrang Radio's drive time show. She now runs Pluggin Baby, a company that helps push new music onto all of the top radio stations around the country. We chat about the impact of the pandemic on the business, having to claim universal credit to get by the worst months of the crisis, how Pluggin Baby has adapted over the past year, and a lot more. Welcome to The Razor's Edge.
Hi Tim. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
That's all right.
It's a bit early, isn't it?
It is far too early of a Tuesday morning.
That's right.
So I wanted to start and look at your background before we get into what we're really here to talk about. So many people recognise you as the voice of Kerrang Radio's drive time show for the best part of 5 years, but you have your own business now, Pluggin Baby. Most people won't have heard of it, so do you want to tell us a little bit about what it is and what you do?
Yeah, so yes, you're right. I am known-ish for my time at Kerrang Radio. It's when me and you first became acquainted, didn't we, up there? In the good old days of Birmingham. And I left Kerrang in 2009, which surprises a lot of people because they still think I'm there sometimes. I'm like, no, I left about like 11 years ago now. Anyway, and then I went and did another few more years in radio. And then in 2013, after 25 years in radio, I decided I've had enough of this, really. I'd like to do something else. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I certainly wasn't qualified to do anything else because I'd been in radio since I left school, 1988. I am ancient. So I just thought, well, I'll just pad out the time until I've decided what to do. And as it was, we were, me and my ex-partner, we were running a record label at that time. And as part of the record label duties, I was doing the plugging because there's no point having a record label unless you're going to promote what you've got on your books, as it were. So I said, well, I know a bit about radio. I'll do the radio plugging. So I'd already started doing a bit of plugging for the artists on the label. And I thought, well, let's maybe extend this and earn some money from it until I've decided what I'm going to do. So I set up Pluggin Baby in 2013, and I've stayed doing Pluggin Baby. But basically a radio plugger or music publicist or radio PR. There's quite a few different names for it. But I'm old school, so I usually use the term Pluggin Baby as a radio plugger. A plugger works with a musician or a label or a manager, and they act as the middle person to get the music to the radio stations or the radio presenters, DJs, producers. So yeah, that's basically what I do. I get approached by musicians all the time, asking, am I available to push their music to radio? And if I am, I'll do it. And if I like it, obviously I have to like the material that I'm plugging. And yeah, I think that was the question you asked. I've forgotten, to be honest. I'm getting a bit older now, Tim, and sometimes I forget what you said 30 seconds ago.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I'm the same. So, is it just you working at Pluggin Baby, or have you got a team with you?
It's just me. My daughter officially does things for Pluggin Baby. But that usually just entails helping me save something, change text of something, or she's supposed to be teaching me how TikTok works. But yeah, teenagers, they're like, Mum, I'm so embarrassed. You can't be on TikTok. Why are you even thinking of going on TikTok? And I'm like, well, it's what I should be doing. Yeah. So yes, but yes, it's me. It's good old me, and yeah, it's easier to deal with just one person, I think.
So I was looking at your roster yesterday on your website, and that's an impressive list of bands. And you mentioned bands approaching you then. So how do bands, artists get on board? How does it work with them joining you?
Well, thank you for the kind compliments. I do have a lovely roster. Not all active at the moment because bands don't release things all the time, but we tend to have a sort of rolling roster where they'll just come to me when they've got a release. And yeah, I guess all of them approached me from seeing me on socials or just the general name around the scene. Pluggin Baby's been around for a while now. They would approach me, and this is what usually happens. They'll just come to me and say, "Hi, we've got a release on the 12th of June. Can you take a listen? Is it something that you can work with? And what do you think we can achieve?" So then the usual routine is I'll listen to what is being sent to me. And if it is suitable, because it's got to be on brand. I'm I do guitar bands, rock. I don't really do that much heavy sort of metal screamo, all that stuff, all that Cookie Monster stuff, as I call it. I can't even do the impression of that. What? All that, I can't understand what, so, whatever. I don't really, I can do that. I can't personally do it. But mostly it's rock, pop rock, indie rock, alternative rock, blues rock, sometimes a bit folk rock. So it's basically guitar band. So if it was a non-guitar band, I would have to seriously think about, can I actually get the results that this artist wants?
Yeah.
And if I don't, I had one yesterday and it was completely unsuitable. It was very 80s sounding sort of pop kind of thing. It sounded like it should have been in the 80s and not really coming out today. So and I thought, I feel so sorry for this guy, because he's spending thousands and thousands of pounds on this plugger that just can't get him results. And I'm like, I know why they can't get you results. It's just not really contemporary. And anyway, so I don't ever take on anyone that isn't suitable. Yeah. So if it is suitable and I like the track and I think I can get the results, I'll say, yeah, I can definitely see you on this station. I can see you on this station. I can't see you getting that high, because often they say, we want to be on national radio. And I always give them a reality check of how hard it is to get on national radio as an independent artist. It's hard enough for major artists to get on national radio. And you're talking, Foo Fighters and Green Day fighting it out for a slot. Who's going to win? Well, one of them isn't going to win. There's only one slot. So, it's even harder at a high level. So, and then if they're happy with what I've said and I think we can get on, then I'll send them the contract. And if they sign it, then we'll work together. And then we'll plot out the release. They'll send me all of their assets, all the WAV and the bio and the socials, all the stuff that you need before plugging. I'll get it all prepped and off we go. That's how it is. And then that process will last about 6 weeks. Yep. Of me plugging. You'll get quite a lot of airplay in the first 3 weeks, and then if I do a replug, then you get another batch of airplay, and then we'll wrap it up after about 8 to 10 weeks. Yep. And they'll say, "Whoa, we got quite a lot of airplay," and I'm like, "Yeah, you did all right." So yeah, I've got a lovely. I call them my family of Pluggin Babies, as I call them, and they often just keep using me because they can trust me. And there's a lot of scoundrels out there. So once you found someone that's not a sociopath, then it's often decent to stick with them. I've heard a few horror stories, unfortunately.
Right. So I wanted to talk about the pandemic, and everyone's probably fed up of talking about it now. But as part of this series, we're looking at how the pandemic has impacted various parts of the music industry. So looking back to yourself in January, February 2020, that seems a lifetime away now, but pre-pandemic, what was Pluggin Baby's workload like and schedule looking like at that point in time?
It was, it's funny though, because it seems like a long time ago, but it seems like yesterday. Last year, around the beginning of 2020, everything was fine, busy, probably turning people away, saying, actually, I'm a bit full up in, March. Can we maybe look at the next single? And certainly I was fine. Even though everything changed in March, I think I went to my last gig about 2 days before lockdown, and it was one of my clients, funnily enough, Dead Reynolds, and it was a local gig, so I'd been to it. But that was the last gig I was at. Even though everything changed for the lockdown for musicians, things for me stayed the same for a few months. And because I work quite far in advance, and my musicians, my band, my family, the clients, they'd all sort of planned their releases in advance. So everything was fine. And I was thinking, this is all right, isn't it? And then suddenly June arrived, and I looked at my diary and I thought, yeah, all that stuff I had booked in January, February is now dried up. We finished those campaigns. Sadly, the musicians haven't been able to get into the studio and record anything new. So my diary was looking a little bit empty. And I thought, well, it usually works out okay. but I couldn't see how it could work out okay at that point. So actually, I applied for universal credit for the first time ever in my life, because I just thought, this is horrific. There's going to be absolutely no income. Um, and that, I think everybody that applied for universal credit in the summer got a payout. I got this £400 payout. As it is, I've had to pay it back because they said, "Oh no, you're earning too much money now." I was like, "Okay, fine." But anyway, but it got that desperate and worrying that I made that decision. Like, okay, I only inquired about universal credit. I didn't ask for it, but I inquired. I said, "Well, my diary's looking all right at the minute, but I can see that the clients are trailing off now, and I'm not qualified to do anything else." I actually started looking for a completely new role in the industry. Outside of the industry. Key point. There wasn't really anything in the industry to go for. We were all going to be in the same boat. If I didn't have any clients, other plugin companies wouldn't have clients either. So I started looking outside the industry. And then I realized I wasn't qualified to do anything because I didn't get enough GCSEs. So I was having a bit of a mare last summer. I sent an email to Bruce Dickinson from Waterbear College of Music in Brighton, and I'd already spoken to Bruce before about various things in the past. And I said, "Bruce, have you got any jobs going? It's all getting a bit, empty with the plugging. The diary is looking free." And I said, "Maybe I can do some mentoring or lectures or, something music industry related, because that's all I've known for over 30 years. And he said, "No, Emma." He said, "No, I'm full up. I don't need anyone else." I was like, "Okay, fine, at least I've tried." And he went, "Why don't you do the master's degree?" Because we talked 2 years previously about me doing the music entrepreneur master's degree with Waterbear. And it didn't work out because I had a lot of things going on. And I said, "Well, I wasn't really interested in spending a 10 grander to do a degree." But he said, "Well, just apply for a student loan." He said, "It'll really help. If you're looking for jobs outside the industry, it'll really help you, because, you might not have the GCSEs, but you can trump all the GCSEs and get a master's degree." And I was like, "Well, yeah, obviously if I've got to pass it first." So I decided to do that. So I signed up for that, but it still wasn't helping me in the meantime. I still had to carry on plodding on. But the good thing is, I panicked for no reason. Bands got back into the studio after lockdown 1. And then we had a period where it was really busy, and I'd cut back on plugging anyway because I started the degree in September. And then, but then it's gone a bit. We're still having the effects of lockdown 1, 2, and 3, because bands are now putting their releases back again because they still can't get in studios because of the lockdowns and the fact that studios could only have one person at a time. So I've had a lot of times where bands have been scheduled in to do a campaign, and then it didn't happen because they've not been able to get either their video done or their actual recording, or the mix hasn't been completed, or whatever. So yeah, I'm definitely still feeling that there is a lot of things have been messed up for bands, and my whole life has changed because of lockdown. The panic of the Pluggin Baby business going down the pan. And you've still got to be really aware of it, because this pandemic hasn't gone yet, and this could be another year. I mean, what happens if we go into another lockdown after this, which we might? Then we're going to have the same old thing again. So yeah, now I've taken on the degree. I'm doing that. I've got another 5 months of hell. It's horrific. Trying to run a full-time business, and single mum dog as well, who's over there on the settee. And a business and a master's when I left school 33 years ago with a couple of GCSEs, not exactly a brain box. But I don't want to slag myself off. I've had a really good year, really good 33 years in the music industry. I've learned a lot, and I've got a lot to give. So, but yeah, we're not out of the woods yet. It's still a struggle.
Yeah. Early days of lockdown especially were stressful for a lot of people. Obviously, you said you went and had to apply for universal credit for the first time and things like that. So is there anything you did to keep on top of your own mental health during that period?
I did a lot of qigong. It's a very interesting technique. And I mean, a lot of people say yoga and things like that, meditation. I've never really taken to it, but just this week I started yoga. But Qigong was pointed out to me as a really good thing to balance the body and the mind. I don't know the ins and outs of it. To be honest, I watch a 10-minute Qigong exercise every day on YouTube. That's about as serious as I'm getting about it. However, I've realized that it's really important for my mental health. I mean, I struggle anyway with my hormones being completely wild because I'm perimenopausal, which is the 10 years leading up to the good old menopause. Literally, I'm bored of talking about the menopause, but I've got to deal with this. But as part of the menopause, your hormones go all haywire. Like if you were pregnant or if you were a teenager, you know, and monthly cycles, things like that. You battle with your hormones all the time, and as part of that, anxiety can get out of control, overwhelm can get out of control, and you can sit at your well, not you necessarily, but I can sit at my desk with my head in my hands, crying when I've got a list of things to do that I need to get on with, but you're unable. Your brain just can't. It's like your brain's fried, and then you add in the stress of the fact that you haven't got any clients coming up, and the fact that you know you are applying for universal credit for the first time ever, and you're panicking that your business is going to go and you haven't got anything else that you can go back, you know, fall back on, plan B. It's horrendous. It was a really stressful time, and I know that my clients struggled with their mental health and what they were going through as well, because most of my clients are independent and they've got their own jobs, and then they do the music as a sort of sideline. Hobbyists, but a bit more serious than that, still trying to make it. But then there's a few that do it full time, and they really struggled. You know, one had recently had a baby with his wife, and he couldn't play any gigs. And then there was another guy, similar situation, but without the baby, and just had everything. He had, you know, had a full year of tour, European tours, UK tours, everything, and then nothing. And so obviously with him we had to stop plugging because there was no income coming in, and I just said, well, I'll just do little things when I can. But he yeah, that guy in particular was all right with his mental health because he'd kind of dealt with it and had a lot of sort of training. He does a lot of counseling as well, so he kind of counseled himself to turn it around. And so he had to, like I had to change everything, you know, everything changed. So then they would start concentrating on selling CDs online instead of at the merch desk at the, you know, at the end of the gig. They were starting to do streaming shows and trying to monetize that. So a lot of, you know, the resilience shined through, and while they could have crumbled, they saw a different way around it. And as we've all had to do, really, life is not back to normal again. I haven't really been out at all. I go out with a dog every day. You know, I go to the supermarket, but yeah, it's weird. I haven't been to the hairdresser for so long. Look at this grey hair, Tim. I mean, I'm glad this is an audio interview, but you can see how long I haven't been to the hairdresser because the roots are, you know, about 8 inches long. Yeah. So I'm a bit scared about going to the hairdresser. I'm not quite there yet. So yeah, it still affects people's mental health and anxiety levels of going outside and sitting in a hairdresser full of women breathing, and yeah. But yeah, mental health has been a problem. But as I say, I've just had to try and deal with it by researching how I could deal with my own hormonal issues and my own anxiety. Because I don't think I get depressed, as it were. I just get really anxious, and I worry a lot, and I go into a panic. And then I think, oh, it's all doom and gloom. And so I suppose it can take your mood down. But I wouldn't say I suffer from depression. I don't take any medication. I just take supplements. But the Qigong has been really good. And I would recommend it to anyone that's suffering, that just needs a bit of centering in their life. You know, it's really good for anxiety, and it's really good for that feeling of that overwhelm when you wake up and you've got a massive list of things to do, but you can't get your head around it. And you're like, oh my God, I've got to write a song. Look, you know, even things like that, if you need to concentrate because you've got to finish lyrics, or you know, you've got some sort of guitar thing that you need to do. I'm not a musician, I don't know the terms, but you know, Qigong is really good, and it's spelled Qigong, Qigong, and it's really good. So 10 minutes of that a day, and I'm telling you, you'll be straight as a straight thing. You'll be happy days.
I'll be Googling that later.
It's really cool. 10 minutes. That's all I do. A 10-minute one. The guy's called Lee. can't remember his surname. I should know that. The amount of times I've done my little centering, it's all just it's just breathing and centering and just being at one with yourself and being able to get your head around situations. And I think everyone needs a bit of that.
Yeah. So throughout this podcast series, people have said how they've made changes to the way they work during the pandemic that they will now take forward. So is there anything that you've done that you would carry on doing once this all ends, if it ever ends?
God, well, my whole life has changed. So I'm just going to carry on as I am. And yeah, it has changed because I've taken on the masters. I've got to continue with that. I've finished that in August. It's shown me that I am a bit of a workhorse and that I maybe need to not work quite as hard because there wasn't really that much enjoyment going on. It's going to make me appreciate live music more because we've been starved of music for a long time. So I will appreciate live music, although I'm a little bit apprehensive about going back out there just yet. I'll probably be masking up for a while. Haven't had my first jab yet, my vaccine or anything yet. So and just be, obviously, you've got to be kinder to yourself and just be aware that this all might happen again. It's not over yet. Look after each other, be kinder to each other. But yeah, my business has really changed. Yeah, I've taken on less, actually, funnily enough, from panicking and saying, oh, I haven't got any clients. I'm now a bit more choosy, and I'd just rather form the more meaningful relationships with less. But I guess that's not anything to do with the pandemic. But yeah, there have been changes, and I've learned how to deal with a lot of things, and qigong's the key. And managing your accounts, because I'm rubbish with accounts. So I've got to be. I've spent. Oh my gosh, yeah. One of the main things that I don't do. I spend so much less money. I've because no hair doing. No suntan sessions. No none of that. I'm quite low maintenance woman anyway. But yeah, I'm not so extravagant. I'd rather, as I say, I'd rather work with less and mean more to the people that I work with than work with 8 clients a month and be struggling to remember what they're called. It's not about earning loads of money. It's about covering my costs and having a nicer time, I think. So yeah, it's calmed me down a bit, I think. Made it stop.
The music industry, and especially the live side of things, has been one of the hardest hit over the last year. So you worked as a promoter in the past too. Can you see, firstly, a return to normality for live shows, and secondly, whether the scene will ever fully recover from this?
Well, I think a lot of people have had a bad time, haven't they, with obviously not having anything coming in. And they may have closed their businesses and gone on to something else. So you're going to have potentially a lot less promoters out there that are able to take on those gigs, at the grassroots level that I used to deal with. The big promotions companies will survive, I'm sure, because they were minted anyway, and the big venues. I'm sure they had, because if you're owned by O2 or something, you're not going to go down the pan, are you? It's definitely would have affected the bartenders or security, people like that. It would have affected them. It probably wouldn't have affected the actual, venue, the Brixton Academy or whatever, whatever I'm talking about, the O2 academies or whatever. Are they still going in Birmingham? Is it still O2 Academy up there?
They're still there, but
they're still there. They're a bit empty at the minute, but they'll recover, and people will be desperate to get back. My daughter's booked up loads of gigs. I've got still gigs that I've got to go to that have been rescheduled. So I think people are keen to get back. I just think it's the lower, not speaking badly of people, the smaller levels, the lower levels, the grassroots, the Emma Scott Presents that takes on 4 independent artists and makes a gig out of it, that sort of level, which is the best level, I'd just like to say. I think they would have struggled, and they would have had to change their path for the past year or so. But hopefully they got universal credit and or any sort of. I mean, there were quite a lot of government handouts, weren't there? I didn't apply for anything except went for universal credit, but only because I didn't really, I was only inquiring, I didn't ask for it, but they gave it to me anyway. But then they took it back later. So cheers for that. I really appreciated that when I was actually a bit more skint, and I was like, I've got to give you the £409 back. No, what's going on? But yeah, I think it's going to be a while yet. And I think there will be people like me that are keen to get back to live shows, but still a bit unsure about hanging out in a room of people that are, you know, properly closed in, because that's what it's like at gigs, you know. I usually head towards the back anyway, but to lean on a wall because I'm getting older now. But there's usually other old people that are leaning on the wall. So yeah, there's going to be a bit of apprehension. But the festivals, you know, it'll come back, but it's not going to be this year, is it? That it's going to be up to its full potential, because people are still just waiting, I think, for it to all go wrong again and for another lockdown. So it's been horrific, and I feel sorry for everybody in that position, because if that was my job and that was my only income, yeah, I would have been screwed. And a lot of people had to, you know, pivot and go and take normal jobs, which is what I was going to do, wasn't I? I was applying for care jobs and looking at jobs at the local fire service and the local council, but I didn't have the GCSEs. So it's a real moment of like, oh my God, you really, you know, like your parents always told you got to have a backup plan. And I didn't, because I'd only done radio in my whole life. And there wasn't really anything I could have gone for.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess people will start getting back to the gigs, and I hope that the promoters that kind of came out of it for a while are going to come back in and support the bands at the, you know, the starting level, and grow some decent bands for the future.
Yeah. So you just mentioned radio again there. So mid-pandemic, you landed yourself a gig at Primordial Radio. What was it like landing at a new station in the midst of all of this?
Well, it's funny enough that it was actually because of the pandemic and the fact that my my client base was starting to go down further. So I started in May, after the boss of Primordial, Moose, asking me. He'd been asking me for years. So it was because of the pandemic that I decided to take it on, because I was doing less plugging. So yeah, that kind of tied into the lockdowns and everything. And as it is, we all do our shows from home anyway. So it wasn't that I was going into a workplace and then I couldn't go into a workplace. We all do our shows from home. My studio is Studio 13. It's from my kitchen, which is just behind me, which you can't actually see because this is audio. But so from that point of view, it was probably because of the pandemic that I took that on. I'm off air at the minute because I'm a bit too busy with the this education lark that I've decided to do. And radio, funnily enough, carried on throughout it all. Radio did not stop. Gigs stopped. Certain things on TV stopped. Everything changed. EastEnders couldn't go and film, could they? So look at that. People that were desperate to watch EastEnders 3 times a week or whatever it's on for, that all stopped. But radio never stopped, and it never will. Radio is the key to everything. You've got breakfast show presenters from national radio stations doing their shows from their spare rooms.
Yeah.
It was amazing, the resilience of radio. And all you need is a microphone and a pair of headphones. And what DJs are doing, you think, how's it actually possible? And it's as far as I can work out, this is what we do at Primordial Radio. We just log on to their system. So you log on to their interface, and you find your show, your music's all scheduled out for you. And then you will add, well, you can do a link, you will just do your link. And I don't think it sounded 100% as good as it could have done if you were in the studio of Radio 2 and then you were suddenly in your spare bedroom, and the dog's barking next door. There's going to be a bit of that, a little bit of a lack of quality. But the guys at Planet Rock, Wyatt's still at home, Darren's still at home. I think Paul Anthony, the breakfast show guy, is still at home. Sometimes in radio, you'd get one DJ that was allowed in, but that's the only person. So often it might have been, the breakfast show DJ, for example. But everybody else was at home, and they're still at home. And these are national radio shows being done from home. And I think it's amazing that it's never stopped. Radio has never stopped. The DJ, and this is the great thing about plugging for me, because I thought, yes, I had trouble with musicians not being able to give me new music to promote because they couldn't get into the studios. But the DJs were always available to play their music if they had managed to get it done. And had radio stopped for some reason, which, as I say, I don't think radio will ever stop. Had radio stopped playing music, then that would have been a problem. Now, the only thing I can think of that actually did stop was the local BBC introducing shows. And there's about 40 of those out around the country. Can't remember how many BBC local radio shows there are, but they don't know why they did it. Actually, it was a bit. If I was in charge, I would not have stopped the BBC introducing show on a Saturday night, because they stopped it to give more local information about COVID. And I just thought there's better times of the week to do that. And when the grassroots music industry scene is completely flawed, you've taken away that platform to get their music heard. So I didn't agree with that. And I did feel sorry for the musicians that, really could have done with some BBC introducing exposure. But that's so I'm bigging radio up, and radio didn't stop. However, that did. A bit of critical analysis that's been brought in from my degree. Pretty much all of it's back. The introducing shows are back now, which is great. And I've got a lot of time for them. And it's a shame that they stopped, because in a time when musicians couldn't play gigs, they could still get radio airplay. And that was the way that I could help musicians, even though they couldn't get out and play gigs, and they couldn't earn money from that. They could still earn some royalties from radio airplay, and they could still get exposure. And that's what I always say about radio. Radio is amazing, and it's that connection with people, because they say, oh, Spotify's come in now. Well, Spotify is just a streaming service. There's no human there. It's an algorithm. It's whatever. But a DJ, when you're listening to a show on a radio, and it's a DJ that's choosing music that that he or she wants in their show, and they've got that personal connection, you can't beat radio for that. And radio has thrived through this whole lockdown. And fair play. It's just a shame that the how they monitor radio listening, Radar stopped at lockdown because they couldn't do it because of humans being near other humans. But I tell you, radio would have just completely gone through the roof. Unfortunately, no figures to show for it, but hopefully radio will come back and show a lot of increased audience. But that's another thing that's a bit of a pain in the bum about lockdown. Radio did really, 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 really well, but no one knew about it because they couldn't monitor it with the Radar diaries. Anywho.
Well, it's been great talking to you this morning. So thank you for taking some time out to join us on this podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'd probably talked far too much, and you're just sitting there politely thinking, Emma, just get on with it, for crying out loud. You just imagine you're on the radio. You've got 30 seconds to speak. Get on with it, woman. Yes, it was not like that at Kerrang. We had a little bit more freedom at Kerrang, but working at Heart was more of a challenge. You can do that in 13 seconds. Why did you do it in 15 seconds? Oh, God. Anywho, I've talked again. Yes. But musicians, keep going. It's been a terrible year, but hopefully you've taken that time to write some killer songs. And don't, you might not have considered radio plugging, and you can do it yourself, by the way. You don't have to hire a plugger. It's the way to get your music out there when you can't play live. And it's the way to get people to hear your music when you're relying on just Spotify, and there's 64,000 songs uploaded to Spotify every day. So think about radio, and it's great. Radio is killer, man. It can be free of charge. You just need to send some emails out. But anyway, that's me. I've got my fingers crossed for you guys and girls.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you keep up to date with future episodes by subscribing to our channels. For more information on this podcast, or for all the latest music news, reviews, interviews and more, head over to our website. www.therazorsedge.rocks.